Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where normally I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. However, I thought it was time for another little trash talk video because I thought of something I could talk about. Maybe it's because we're in the middle of looking at all these Planeswalker decks, but it made me remember a little project I'd worked on about a year ago. And yeah, I thought I would just use this as an opportunity to talk about it. So we talk about Magic the Gathering, obviously a lot on this channel. That's kind of like the main thing. But also tabletop RPGs are very close to my heart. It's I would honestly say it's probably like my favorite hobby these days, just because it's I think it's just a really great creative outlet for me. It's kind of like the perfect hobby. And over the last year, I've been kind of like really pushing myself more to do like open table games at my local game store and introduce like new people to the hobby and get them playing games. And it's just really a great time, and I love doing it. Um, so my history with tabletop RPGs is not weird, I would say. Obviously, a lot of people, especially these days, have started with D&D 5th edition. When I started with tabletop RPGs, 5th edition was, years off. I think we are actually still solidly in 2nd edition days, or 3rd edition had maybe only just like come out. And I was like 12 maybe, at that age where you're starting to crystallize into a true nerd. So my first RPGs were actually this completely batshit selection here of Palladium Heroes Unlimited. That was actually the first RPG book I ever got, and it's like the size of like an old like phone book, and it is not a good game. It is super janky and unbalanced, but it was all I had at the time, so I knew. There was also the Fighting Fantasy. These were normally choose your own adventure books, but there was like this other separate book here, which was for making your own like free form adventures. Essentially this was like a little dungeon master's guide for like this very simple rule set. You had like 3 stats essentially, and it came with a couple of like example dungeons in there. Really brutal, unforgiving thing, but again, that kind of set the spark in me to like essentially start becoming the forever DM that I am these days. And D20 Modern, this is the first game I really, really super got into. It is basically D&D. It's like the 3rd edition rule set, but it's just set in like kind of modern day, contemporary day Earth rather than fantasy realms or whatever. But yeah, there were rules to introduce, like supernatural effects and stuff. So you do games like you do like X-Files or like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something. But most of it was grounded in sort of modern day and is meant to be kind of like street level heroes, like vigilantes, or kind of like spec ops soldiers. Really, really flexible game. Had a bunch of expansions. None of which I have anymore because I loved this game back in the day, but I have since discovered other new games. The first edition of D&D I actually got started with was 4th edition. This was like the first edition where like basically I could get in on the ground floor, because when I was starting to get into RPGs properly and start playing them was sort of in my university days, and the 3rd edition was sort of like winding down, and there was a lot of content out there, and it was very kind of inaccessible. So I was actually really excited when 4th edition came out because, like I said, I could get in on the ground floor, and I had great fun with this edition. I know it's super controversial, but I think these days, like a lot of attitudes towards it have mellowed, and like there's a lot of games actually now which draw inspiration from 4th edition. I would say that D&D 5e, having played a decent amount of 5e, also draws a lot of inspiration from 4th edition, like in the way it does certain like resources and the way just certain things work. There's a lot of kind of DNA shared between them. So yeah, basically, if you don't like 4th edition, that's fine. That's your opinion. I had a great time with it. I really loved it. I do acknowledge the criticisms with it. It was a super crunchy, obviously very tactical based game. It was very war gamey and stuff. But at the time, which was like early mid-20s, that's what I really liked. But these days, I'm into more kind of like softer, simpler narrative games. One of the best things I ever did, I think, was join the RPG subreddit. I've been on Reddit now for about 7 years, I would say, so which is probably not a lot compared to like some real true crusty veterans. But this is one of the very first subreddits I joined, and this was great. This really opened my eyes because in the past 7 years, this subreddit has really helped me discover a lot more games within the hobby and like really branch out and kind of find the games that I like. And one of the first major set of games this subreddit introduced me to, or I discovered because of it, was the Powered by the Apocalypse games. which were these were released back in 2010. I want to say the very first one was Apocalypse World, and Powered by the Apocalypse it's sort of like a rule system and it's like a design philosophy. So these are very narrative based games, where a lot of um, there were a lot of character decisions made, like kind of shape the narrative. There's a lot of kind of like shared world building with it. A lot of decisions are very narrative. There's not there are rules, but like it's not as crunchy, if that makes sense, I suppose. But yeah, I really liked them. When I first looked at them, when I was still kind of like coming off like the D&D 4e high, I was like, oh, this looks weird and I don't really understand it. But like in time, as this kind of genre of games has evolved into like Blades of the Dark is another good one. It was like that's kind of an offshoot of the system. Yeah, they're very narrative systems that ask players to really like contribute and stuff, and it's less about kind of grinding out stats with like magic weapons or stuff, and it's more about how do your characters' actions affect the world, and do we really need 500 pages of rules to have a good time and play a role playing game. So the Power by the Apocalypse system, not all of them, but for the majority of them, especially kind of like the first sort of wave of them, I'd say like the first, I don't know, for whatever, the first wave of them. There are some diceless ones out there, and some that do things a different way. But the main stat shared amongst them is this system of 2d6 plus your relevant stat, and then you get basically 3 successes. Some games might use 5 or other different results, but you do 2d6 plus stat, and if you get 6 or less, that is a failure. You get 7 to 9, that is a partial success, and 10 or more is a success of what you're achieving. So immediately this made it feel very different from D&D, because in D&D you set like a DC, like a target number depending on the task you're trying to do. Like, oh, if you're trying to kick down like a flimsy wooden door, that's like DC 10, but if you're trying to kick down like an iron door, that's DC 30, that kind of thing. Whereas this is always you're just trying to get at least 7 plus to get some sort of success. And at first I thought that was super weird. Like, oh, what about like tasks that are really difficult to do, or like monsters that are really difficult to hit? It's actually fine, because you just narrate the outcome that makes sense. Like, you can be like, oh, I tried to kick down an iron door. Like, well, we don't need to roll for that, because that's literally impossible. Like, we might roll for it if your character is if it narratively makes sense for your character to do it, then sure. But what I really liked about the Power by the Apocalypse games is this partial success thing, because up until then I'd been playing games which were binary success or fail. And what makes, I think, the Power by the Apocalypse, what gave them sort of a bit of identity, was this partial success thing, where you can succeed at a cost, or with a reduced effect, or like an unwelcome consequence, which makes the narrative far more interesting. And I really latched onto it, and I got really obsessed with these games for quite a while. Bear this in mind, we'll come back to this after I've finished this rambling story and gotten to the actual point of this video. So D&D and MTG, both owned by Hasbro, so a crossover was inevitable. We've had the Magic the Gathering crossover, where D&D has crept into Magic the Gathering, but also we've had the other way, where Magic the Gathering has crossed over into D&D. So we've had products like the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, Strixhaven. All these I've heard are like pretty good. Like, I've not bought any of these. Like, I've long sort of given up on buying any kind of sort of D&D supplements or anything. But from what I understand, these were all pretty well received. They all had like pretty good like player options in them. I believe WotC also did like a series of plane shift articles, I think they were called, where again it was like less involved things, like maybe like, oh, this is how you do Innistrad in D&D, that kind of stuff. And like, from what I understand, these are absolutely fine, and these are great for like if you want to run games set in those worlds, like in Ravnica. But they're for playing, like normal people within the setting. So it's really no different from sort of like regular D&D, where it's like, oh, I want to play a rogue, but like we'll set in Ravnica, so you can align with a guild, that kind of stuff. Like same with Theros, same with Strixhaven. You're still playing essentially like normal people, and there's nothing wrong with playing like normal people within Magic the Gathering settings. For ages, the Weatherlight crew were you were like the faces of the franchise center. They were like the main characters in the storyline. We had, I think, about 3 blocks with the Weatherlight crew because we all of Tempest, Mercadian Masks, and Invasion were all centered around the Weatherlight crew, the original Weatherlight crew of Gerard and Sisay and Tarngarth and Squee and all those. And some of those characters are still around now. They frequently get referenced in kind of like nostalgia products. So yeah, definitely nothing wrong with playing normal, normal people, as as normal as the Weatherlight crew can be. Like they've got their own kind of history of being kind of extraordinary. But there's if you want to play, oh, I want to do a game where we're all like guild members in Ravnica, you've got the material to do that. But I mean, the elephant in the room is the Planeswalkers, right? So these obviously Planeswalkers have obviously become like the face of the game for the past, I would say, oh, like 15 years. Let's say 15 years, just to be on the safe side. Basically, as soon as like Alara came down and Planeswalkers started becoming like way more prominent within the storylines. I mean, you only have to look back at the the past few like kind of sets and storylines we've had over the, I'd say, the past decade, and how integral Planeswalkers have always been to the storyline. You still have normal mortal characters within the storylines, but they are very much, I feel, side characters compared to the Planeswalkers, who are obviously jumping between worlds, and it makes sense, but because Planeswalkers can travel between worlds, kind of like the original Weatherlight crew did. The Weatherlight crew went between different planes and stuff, but we all could always follow their adventures. And it's the same with the Planeswalkers. It's always fun to see, like, oh, what's Chandra going to do on Kaladesh? What's she going to do on Innistrad? What's she going to do, when she goes to Ravnica and there's the War of the Spark, all that kind of stuff. So, I think a big thing of, Planeswalkers are definitely, I think, squarely Magic the Gathering's identity, and it's a shame that those D&D crossover products don't give you the opportunity to play Planeswalkers. And I mean, that's because Planeswalkers are obviously meant to be massively powerful. They're basically the equivalent of superheroes. And I know that's kind of been said derogatorily before, like when we had the Gatewatch, like people used to call it like the Justice League, or the MTG Avengers, that kind of thing, which is kind of funny considering we've got like a Marvel crossover set coming I think next year, which is, I mean, if that's your thing, then fine, but I shudder to think of it. But Planeswalkers are essentially superheroes. So, which is not something the D&D 5e rule set does, I feel like, a great job of representing, or it could, but I feel like it would be very clunky. It's not a system designed for superheroes, essentially. But there are obviously games designed for superheroes. The most, the ones I can think of, the most successful, the biggest ones, are Mutants and Masterminds and Icons. I'm sure, there's tons of other superhero RPGs. These are the two main ones, as far as I'm concerned. So, you could say, oh, if you want to do a game where the players are Planeswalkers, a superhero game is like a great option, right? Because these give you the framework to build a character who has like essentially superpowers, like magic powers, and they're really like a cut above most other mortals. They can get into really crazy high power adventures. So that's an option there if you want to do like a RPG where players are playing as Planeswalkers. The thing is, these books are also like pretty substantial, and I've always kind of wanted to run a superhero game before, but not delve through like huge books like this. So a few years ago, I wrote my own like kind of little superhero RPG, which I based on the Powered by the Apocalypse system. It was very straightforward, very simple, very kind of narrative focused. There wasn't like pages and pages of rules for like different powers. It was just like, right, okay, you have this superpower, and like we're clever people, we can work out what narratively that would allow you to do within the story, within the game. And a few months after I'd written this, I was just like, oh, you know what? I made this connection like, oh, Planeswalkers are basically superheroes, and why not combine the two? Like, we can modify the rules very slightly. And that gave me Sparks, which is my very janky homebrew Magic the Gathering RPG where you play as Planeswalkers. And I just want to use this video to kind of like just kind of get it out there and see what people like think about it. I just want everyone to talk about it, honestly, because it's been living in my little project folder where I write RPGs and stuff for ages, and yeah, I just thought I'd give it a bit of light of day, especially on this channel, obviously, where I talk about Magic the Gathering all the time. So let's get into Sparks and what that entails. So in Sparks, your characters have 5 stats: action, control, force, mind, and heart. So action is for quick, instinctive action. So any kind of athleticism or acting with like reflex or instinct. That's action. Control is when you act with like skill or precision or care. So I'll come with some examples later. Force is just pure strength, pure power. Mind is how clever the character is, and heart is kind of like their charisma, their authority, their willpower, that kind of thing. So I took some inspiration here from Fate Accelerated, which is a game I'm not super keen on, but it does a few things which I think are worth drawing inspiration from. So the action, control, and force I used in my little superhero game because I thought this was a good way of representing how superheroes use their superpowers. Because you can either use them quickly, carefully, or essentially like brute force, like just go all out. So as an example, so these stats are not just necessarily for like a character's physical action. This could also represent them using like their magic, right? So using Chandra as an example, if she was throwing out like a quick fireball at like a surprise attacker, like she'd been ambushed, she throws out a quick fireball, that's action. If she's trying to like maybe like weave a jet of fire around a bunch of obstacles to hit a target, that would be control. And if she's just doing a big fireball, that would be force. And then mind and heart are just kind of there, like I don't know. Mind is like, oh man, I identify what's my knowledge of fire law. That could still work, And heart is say more the charisma side of things. But yeah, so I was pretty happy with the whole action, control, and force thing being able to apply to both a character's physical action and also like their ability to control their powers. So all the attributes start at +0, which this is kind of like how PBTA games are generally set up. Like the numbers are generally very low because when you're rolling like 2d6 and adding a stat and essentially trying to get 7 or more, you don't need really massively high numbers for things to work. So your attributes start at 0. You can modify your attributes in any way so that they can, as long as they total +4. So what this means is you could say, I want +3 force and +3 mind, but I'll take like a -2 control. So it still totals +4, so you can do that. But an attribute can't be lower than -2 or higher than +3. So you could, like do a little spread. You could just do like +1 and 4 stats, or you could, there's a lot of kind of variety in how you arrange those stats. And then you also have to choose your color alignment because we're in Magic the Gathering. This was a thing that I don't think was really in the D&D crossover things, like because obviously like color is so important to Magic the Gathering. It's like a whole defining thing how characters are aligned to the different colors, and I just don't think it was present in those D&D crossovers at all. If it was, let me know. But like from what I kind of read when skimming through, it's like you don't get any. It's kind of implied through your character's actions and stuff. But I wanted to give an actual mechanical benefit, especially for planeswalkers, obviously they're so tied to color. So when you align. When you choose a color alignment, you basically get a extra like bonus pip, and this can raise your stat above +3, so you can go up to +4. So if you align yourself to white, you get either +1 control or heart, blue is control or mind, black is force or mind, red is action or heart, and green is action or force. If you've got like a character who you always envision as being 2 colors, always historically been 2 colors. So, for example, let's say Saheeli, who has always been red blue, you would just choose one of those 2. There's no, there's nothing saying you can't act in a way that embodies the other color. This is just kind of like the primary color you align yourself to. Or like Nissa. Like Nissa has always been green, but she has branched out to be green-blue and green-black before. So yeah, this is kind of like, if we cut your character, what color do they bleed, essentially? So yeah, I thought that'd be a fun way of showing color alignment and giving a little boost there. So just a reminder, this is the mechanic for the game. You roll 2d6 plus whatever the relevant stat is. So if your result is 2 or less, that is a disaster. That's a critical fail. 3 to 6 is a failure. You just fail. Something really bad happens. 7 to 9 is a problem, which is the mixed success. So this is either you succeed but only just, or you succeed but there's an unwelcome consequence or a lessened effect, that kind of thing. Like you do it but only just, and that's where I think the joy of this system comes out. 10 to 11 is just success, you just do it, and 12 or higher is a triumph, which is a success plus something else. So yeah, that is basically it. That is the whole mechanic of the game. And then you also have a couple other stats. You have your life, which is 3 plus your combined force and heart. So most attacks will do 2 damage, or 3 if it's especially potent. And then you also have your mana, which is equal to 1 plus your combined action, control, and mind to a minimum of 1. So mana is used to basically I love an RPG that has like a meta currency that you can spend to like get big splashy effects. A game I'm playing a lot at the moment is Easy D6, where everyone has like karma points which you can use to modify dice rolls. It's really, really fun. So mana can be spent to upgrade your dice roll result by 1 step. So if you get like a problem, you can spend a point of mana and you go up to being a success instead. And you can, the whole purpose of this is to like narratively say like how you've used mana, how you use like your magic to like kind of improve your circumstances. Say for example, like like Gideon's jumping off a ledge, and like, oh, he just misses the, I don't know, just misses the ledge that he's trying to grab for, or something. He gets a failure, and just like, oh, I'm going to spend a mana to make it a problem. Like, oh, let's say maybe he uses his mana to like whip out his, what's this called, the Surul, like the whip sword he has, and like, oh, and that grabs like a gargoyle or something that's jutting out, and so he's made it, but only just, and then you've upgraded the step from failure to a problem instead. So like he's made the jump, but now he's hanging, in midair, suspended on just his Surul, like a weird beefy Spider-Man. So that's things aren't there. Survive with 1 life left. So if you take a hit from something, you spend a mana to stay on your feet with at least 1 life left. So that's throwing up like a like a shield of magic to protect yourself from big hit. Or you can spend mana to do a big cool thing with your magic. So doing all these other sort of like stats, these stat rolls and stuff, we can always assume that the character's using their magic in some way, like kind of like low effort magic. For example, like Chandra wouldn't need to spend mana just to like make an attack with like a firebolt or something. You could just say like, all right, Chandra's player, like roll your stat. Let's say roll force if you're just going to try something, blow something up with a fireball. Like, okay, you did it. You blow the thing up with a fireball. But the big cool thing with your magic is like like summoning a fire elemental, or like stopping time if you're like Teferi, like a big flashy cinematic moment. So the magic is basically the equivalent of these superpowers that I had in my original hack. So the last part of the character creation is like choose your magic, and this is like again one of the defining things of the characters. Like everyone loves this about planeswalkers, right? Like, what is their specialty? What is essentially their superpower? So, like, Chandra's is pyromancy, Tezzeret's is artifacts, Liliana's is necromancy, Jace's whatever the plot needs him to have, like illusions, telepathy, a bit of time travel. Like, what can't Jace do? But like, this is essentially their superpower, which is gives you the narrative permission to do stuff within the story as long as it makes sense. Like we can say like, oh, Garrick's magic is that he controls animals, so we can make a lot of narrative assumptions what that lets him do within the game. We don't have to have like 6 pages of rules saying like, if you control animals, you can do these 10 abilities, and just like, it's fine. Like we're clever people. We know what that character can do. You also choose 3 aspects. So these are defining traits, talents, and objects of your character. So these are essentially like here to represent skills and special items. So this could be like Vivian's arc bow. This could be like Tamio, just like having all these books of like academic knowledge. It could just be like Garrick being really big and strong. So there's a lot of kind of, again, freeform here. This is there's not a list of these. You just make them up as to be appropriate. If you make a roll and you have a relevant aspect, you basically just get an extra dice and you discard the lowest. It's kind of like advantage in D&D or and lots of other games that do something similar. And then you choose your name, species, appearance, plane of origin, etc. All the background stuff. And then that's it. And then your character's ready to wander the blind eternities and get into all sorts of trouble and adventure. So that is the basic rundown on this little homebrew RPG I've written called Sparks, where you get to play as Planeswalkers, which was hacked from a superhero game I wrote. I would love to know what people's thoughts are on this. Like, if you're interested, I can do a second video of this maybe, where I go maybe a bit more into mechanics. There was a lot I didn't touch on because, otherwise this video would be a lot longer. But, if you're interested in this, I can do, another follow-up video on it, or like maybe you weren't interested at all. Like, I don't know. But I'd love to hear what people's just general thoughts and comments are about, I don't know, about RPGs, about how Magic the Gathering works as an RPG. Do you think like the two should remain separate? Do you think Planeswalkers work as superhero equivalents in Magic the Gathering? I don't know. Whatever thoughts you've got on this particular trash talk subject, stick a comment below. I'll definitely give those a read. And yes, next video we'll be back to looking at Planeswalker decks. I just thought I'd take this opportunity. It seemed appropriate to talk about Planeswalkers in the middle of reviewing Planeswalker decks. Anyway, hope you're having a lovely day. Hope you continue to have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time, and have an amazing day.